Funding for the trial of Adolf Eichmann was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the annual financial support from viewers like you. Additional funding was provided by the Charles H. Revson Foundation and the Righteous Persons Foundation.
I admit my participation freely and without pressure. After all, I was the one who transported the Jews to the camps. Yet what is there to admit? I carried out my orders.
Criminal case number 40-61.
Are you Adolf Eichmann, the son of Adolf Karl Eichmann?
When Berlin fell to the Allies in May of 1945 and Germany surrendered, many Nazi leaders were captured and charged with war crimes. Adolf Eichmann was not among them. The 1946 war crimes trial in Nuremberg brought to light Nazi atrocities, but did not focus on crimes against the Jews. From the witness stand came the first public word of Eichmann's horrible role. One of his lieutenants testified that Eichmann told him, quote, "I will leap laughing into my grave with satisfaction in the knowledge that I personally helped to exterminate millions of Jews," unquote. 48 hours after this incriminating testimony, Eichmann was already using an alias, and he slipped away from an American prisoner of war camp 35 miles from Nuremberg and disappeared into the mountains of central Germany. He adopted the name Otto Henninger and became a chicken farmer. After the war, many Jews moved to the new state of Israel, established in 1948 after a brutal struggle for independence. Among the first citizens of this new state were nearly 300,000 European Jews who had survived the Holocaust. Residents and settlers alike began the monumental task of building their new nation.
People then, in the years 48 and 49, were all burdened with the building of homes for their families. They didn't like to hear so much about what happened to us in the camps. And besides, I can say it, I'm not ashamed. The Israelis related to us as cowards. They even used to call us names like Sabonim, pieces of soap.
In the beginning, when we came, we would tell our stories, but we soon realized that no one was listening to us. People did not have the patience to hear our stories. We therefore fell silent and did not speak about it. Everybody kept his story inside himself.
But for David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, it was his nation's duty to tell the story of the crimes against the Jews and to catch the war criminals responsible. He had announced that Adolf Eichmann must be brought to justice if he is still alive. In 1950, with the help of the Nazi underground, Eichmann fled Germany to hide in Argentina. He worked first as a surveyor in a small mountain village. After 2 years, he felt safe enough to bring his wife and 3 sons over from Germany. They eventually moved to Buenos Aires. He worked on a rabbit farm then as a mechanic at the Argentine Mercedes-Benz plant, and he soon became a foreman and was building a new life. But in the fall of 1959, the Israelis got a tip that Eichmann was living in a poor suburb of Buenos Aires under the name of Ricardo Clement.
In the beginning, the matter was between Ben-Gurion and me. We discussed what we should do with this information. The name and address of Eichmann, which were in our hands. I, of course, recommended that we plan his capture. Ben-Gurion agreed.
Israel sent special agents to Argentina, and they kept Eichmann under surveillance for months. They photographed his house from every angle, drew up detailed maps. Undercover, they asked him for directions, taking pictures of him with a camera hidden in a briefcase. Finally, on May 11, 1960, they struck. They grabbed Eichmann after he got off a bus on his way home from work and took him to a safe house for questioning. He signed a statement saying he was willing to stand trial.
I, the undersigned, Adolf Eichmann, state herewith of my own free will, since my true identity has now been revealed, that there is no point in my continuing to evade justice. I declare myself willing to proceed to Israel and to stand trial there before a competent court.
The Israelis drugged him and smuggled him out of the country to Israel. And once there, he was booked and processed like any criminal suspect.
The main goal was not the capture. If we had wanted to get rid of him, we could have done that in Argentina. The entire operation had a single purpose, to bring him to Israel and to make a trial on the Holocaust.
It was a nice May day. Monday, I came to the Knesset, arrived from Haifa, and I saw there was some tension, there were some rumors. Something important will happen. We didn't know what. Ben-Gurion asked to be allowed to give an announcement.
A short time ago, one of the greatest of Nazi war criminals, Adolf Eichmann, was found, is already under arrest in Israel, and will shortly be put on trial under the Nazis and Nazi collaborators law.
People stand up, the members of the Knesset, the gallery, the journalists, all stand up. They embraced each other. It was, how to tell you, I have no words to describe it. For all of us, and especially for me, it was euphoria, a superhuman feeling of happiness that justice will be done.
Headlines around the world announced Eichmann's capture. Israel's kidnapping him had violated Argentina's sovereignty and provoked a firestorm of controversy. Even Israel's friends were critical. The UN convened a special session to consider Argentina's complaint.
Is this a threat to peace? Eichmann brought to trial by the very people to whose total physical annihilation he dedicated all his energies. It is because we know that no threat to the sovereignty of the Argentine or of any other country has or will come from Israel, because of the sense of justice we both share, that we say in real friendship that this is not an item that should divide us any longer.
Resolution, please signify so by raising your hand.
Argentina accepted Israel's formal apology, and the UN voted to let Israel keep Eichmann. He was taken to a remote top-security prison where he spent 11 months living side by side with the investigators who were building the case against him.
This was, at the time, one of the most secret places in the country. No one knew where we were, not even our families.
Mickey Goldman, a survivor of Auschwitz, was chief inspector of Bureau 6, a special police task force created to prepare the prosecution's case.
He was guarded 24 hours a day by people, by policemen. In addition to that, he was checked by one of our doctors twice a day. And before he received his food, one of the guards tasted the food in order to make sure no one put poison in it.
Every day, the investigators recorded their interrogation of Eichmann. The tapes were transcribed every night, and the next morning, the prisoner was given his chance to correct them. In the end, Eichmann's description of his life would fill more than 3,500 pages. A picture of the man was emerging. He was born in 1906 near Cologne, Germany, but grew up in Austria. He dropped out of high school, went to work as a traveling salesman for an American oil company, and when he was 26, he joined the growing Nazi Party. Eichmann married in 1935. He was assigned to the Jewish department of the SS, the leading agent of terror in Hitler's regime. He studied the Jews, gathering information about their leaders, synagogues, businesses, culture. He even asked the SS to pay for Hebrew lessons. He visited Palestine in 1937 to consider the possibility of sending German Jews there. The Nazis seized Austria on March 12, 1938. 4 days later, Eichmann was sent to supervise expelling the country's Jews. It was here that he proved himself to be the Nazis' foremost Jewish specialist. After Israeli investigators completed their portrait of him, they turned to Israel's Polish-born Attorney General Gideon Hausner. His legal case would depend on how well Bureau 6 had done its job.
They presented us with summaries of the different chapters of the Holocaust, which are very accurate, very well done, which show good taste and a good orientation in historiography.
We didn't know too much about the Holocaust when we started the trial. Let's not mince words, but we didn't know too much about it. Ben-Gurion knows very well. He was going to conduct this trial because he wanted a generation who had known a thing, our young people, to learn in order never to forget.
34-year-old Gabriel Bach was a legal advisor to Bureau 6.
We were very much aware of the fact that this was a special case with enormous historic impact. This was the first and only case until that point where the Holocaust was the focal point and where we could deal with it in all its aspects. We went through hundreds of thousands of cases, hundreds of different sources of evidence, with microfilms and all the Nuremberg trials and all the German documents and the documents in all the various European countries. And then after all the evidence was collected, the team of the prosecution, we sat together and we decided what form the case for the prosecution should take.
While the Israelis prepared their case, Eichmann also was busy poring over the evidence. He asked Dr. Robert Servatius to represent him. Servatius was a well-known lawyer from Cologne who had been a defense attorney at the Nuremberg trials, but Eichmann could not afford him. So Israel agreed to pay his fee, and the 63-year-old lawyer arrived in October of 1960 to talk with his client for the first time. He had to have a strategy that would counter the well-laid plans of the Israeli prosecutors.
We regarded, legally speaking, the concerted effort of the Nazi machine to exterminate the Jewish people as a vast conspiracy. It's a vast criminal conspiracy.
We knew that it wasn't Eichmann giving an order to kill that, and therefore he's guilty of a murder, and another murder, and another murder.
The law of conspiracy in America and in other English-speaking countries regards one of the conspirators as acting for all the others, and all members of the conspiracy are responsible for the conspiracy.
Here there was the opportunity to have the man, the central figure in the whole of the execution of this criminal scheme, and to be able to depict point after point what happened. We decided to present at least one live witness from every country to describe and bring home and to show people really what happened on the human level. Because, you know, documents and figures and even heaps of corpses, there comes a moment when these things don't signify anything anymore.
We had to bring the picture of those 10 years in the middle of the 20th century after the birth of Christianity to the conscience of the world. That was possible.
A community theater in Jerusalem was converted into a 750-seat courtroom, big enough to accommodate the large numbers of spectators and journalists expected to attend. The Israelis built a bulletproof glass booth to protect Eichmann. The booth would become the trial's most enduring symbol. The authorities wanted to take no chances with the safety of their notorious suspect. When the day of the trial arrived, Monday, April 11, 1961, security inside and outside the courthouse was very tight.
There was a big demand for entrance tickets to come into the trial, and when the trial opened, the entire hall was occupied by press from around the world. There were hundreds of them.
An American television company made the unprecedented request to videotape the entire trial.
This was such an exceptional case, and the public interest in Israel and abroad was so tremendous that we somehow owed it to history and to the public interest to be able to really follow this in all details.
The trial of Adolf Eichmann would be the first trial ever televised.
And then, of course, there was that moment when Eichmann came in behind his glass booth, and for a minute we didn't feel it, and then suddenly the realization that Eichmann was sitting there, and this was a moment of tremendous emotion. You know, our people from the Israel radio were giving a running commentary. Suddenly when Eichmann came in, they were overwhelmed by their emotions. They just couldn't continue.
And when I look at him sitting in the glass cage, it was for me a strong feeling. I got the imagination that it is a brutal man, a strong German-type man. And I find in the cage there a rat, a mouse, with frightened eyes.
The most dominant picture in my mind was the first moment of this trial, when these judges came into the courtroom and he jumped up to attention with the Israeli flag behind them and the emblem of the state behind them. That man whose only object in life had become to destroy these people, that man should stand trial for an Israeli court representing a sovereign court of the Jewish people that he wanted to destroy. To me, that showed the importance of the creation of the State of Israel more than anything that had happened before.
Under Israeli law, the case would be decided not by a jury, but by 3 judges. Presiding Judge Moshe Landau of the Israeli Supreme Court, Judge Benjamin Halevi of the Jerusalem District Court, and Judge Yitzhak Raveh of the Tel Aviv District Court. All 3 were educated in Germany and had emigrated to Palestine as young men before the war. They would hear the accused in his own language. There would be no chance of a translator making a critical mistake.
You are accused before the court in terms of an indictment containing 15 counts. First count. The accused, together with others, caused the deaths of millions of Jews as one of the persons responsible for the implementation of the Nazis' plan known as the final solution of the Jewish question. The accused carried out acts of extermination that were coordinated with massacre units mobilized from the SS and called Einsatzgruppen. Such units, together with others, caused the deaths of additional hundreds of thousands of Jews by assembling them into ghettos, which were implemented under cruel and inhuman conditions in Germany, together with others, perpetrated the extermination of Jews by putting them to death in concentration camps, the purpose of which were mass murder. Were Auschwitz, Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, and Maidanek acts with the intention of destroying the Jewish people. Do you understand the indictment?
Before Eichmann entered his plea, his attorney rose to present their first line of defense.
I request the permission of the court to object before the accused replies as to whether he admits guilt or not.
Sirvanius asked the court to dismiss the case immediately. He argued that Jewish judges could not be fair to Eichmann.
I ask the court to consider whether reasons exist for any one of the judges to be disqualified from sitting in judgment, or whether he himself should declare himself prejudiced.
Eine solche Vermutung liegt nahe. Sie ergibt sich daraus, dass das ganze jüdische
This concern arises from the fact that the entire Jewish people were drawn into the Holocaust.
We were aware of the fact that some of the preliminary objections of Servatius, that this was really maybe his most serious defense. And we, of course, prepared thoroughly for these points.
Attorney General Hausner responded that no judge, Jewish or otherwise, could or should be objective about genocide.
I wish to touch upon the first argument, which in fact is a general disqualification of any Jew to judge a man who is accused of attempting to destroy the Jewish people. The argument states, since you were the victims, you Jews cannot sit in judgment of Adolf Eichmann. Let him be judged by neutral persons. No one can demand that anyone be neutral towards the crime of genocide. And if a judge believes there is a person in the whole world who can be neutral towards this crime, then this judge is not fit to sit in judgment.
The preliminary arguments concluded on a Friday. The judges adjourned the court for the weekend, promising a ruling on Monday. Monday, April 18, 1961. The courtroom filled to capacity with nearly everyone speculating on the judge's decision.
I open the sixth session of the trial. The court will now read the following decision.
After a thorough evaluation of Eichmann's objections, the court ruled that they did not constitute sufficient reason to dismiss the case. As in any trial, the judges would have to divorce themselves from their emotions.
It is true that the memory of the catastrophe of the Holocaust stirs every Jew to the depths of his heart. But when this case is brought before us, it is our duty to restrain those feelings when we sit in judgment. And this duty we shall keep.
Prosecution of Adolf Eichmann could now begin.
Are you guilty or not guilty on the first count?
which means in the sense of the indictment, not guilty. That was not so very original on his part. That was a phrase used by some of the defendants in the Nuremberg trials.
The question whether he feels morally guilty or not is not for the court to decide. That's his private business, he wants to say. Within the framework of law, and within that framework alone, he thinks he has a right to say, I'm not guilty.
In the spirit of the indictment, not guilty.
And so it went for every single one of the 15 counts against him. For each charge, Eichmann's reply was the same.
The prisoner may sit down.
It was time for Israeli Attorney General Gideon Hausner to make his opening statement. He had been troubled. He felt that since he was not a survivor, since he had not suffered in the Holocaust, perhaps he was not qualified to lead Eichmann's prosecution. Before the trial started, he visited the ghetto fighters' kibbutz to discuss his doubts with Yitzhak Zugerman and his wife, and other leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
And they were talking the whole night, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, the people there said, Gideon, you speak as if you were there. You know so much, and your feelings are so strong that we appoint you to speak in our name.
When I stand before you, judges of Israel, in this court to accuse Adolf Eichmann, I do not stand alone. Here with me at this moment stand 6 million prosecutors. But alas, they cannot rise to level the finger of accusation in the direction of the glass dock and cry out, J'accuse, against the man who sits there, because their ashes have been piled up in the mounds of Auschwitz and the fields of Treblinka, or spilled into the rivers of Poland. And their graves are scattered throughout the length and breadth of Europe. Their blood cries to heaven, but their voice cannot be heard. Thus it falls to me to be their mouthpiece and to deliver the heinous accusation in their name.
They heard the speech on the radio of the bus. And then when he said, I'm not standing here alone, but with 6 million Jews, some of the older people bowed their heads. Some tears were shed. Most of us were very pale.
There was only one man who had been concerned almost entirely with the Jews, whose business had been their destruction. That man was Adolf Eichmann.
Using witness testimony and Nazi documents, Hausner began his two-part mission to convict Eichmann and at the same time to bring a new generation in Israel and the world the full story of the Holocaust. When Germany seized Austria in 1938, Eichmann took charge of expelling the country's Jews. He summoned Aaron Lindenstrauss, a German Jewish leader, to Austria for a meeting.
We went from one courtyard to another, walked up some steps, and came to a very large and beautiful hall in the Rothschild Palace. There, Eichmann was sitting behind a large desk.
Eichmann was learning to use Jewish leaders to implement his policies. He wanted to show Lindenstrauss how efficiently he was deporting Austria's Jews.
He began by saying that the emigration rate in Germany was not good, that he was very dissatisfied with it. Things were not working as they should. The whole process was moving too slowly in his absence. And then Eichmann said, I demand 1,000 exit visas every day. This is the minimum.
Do you remember the name of the place you were supposed to see?
Of course. This was the central office for the emigration of the Jews.
Another German Jew, Franz Meyer, attended the meeting with Eichmann. He described for the Israeli court Eichmann's Austrian operation.
What was your impression later?
Terrible. Terrible. It looked like an automated factory, like a flour mill connected to a bakery. In one end, you put a Jew who still has money and maybe a factory or a shop and an account in a bank. And then he passes from counter to counter, from office to office, so that when he comes out the other end of the building, he has no money, no rights, only a passport on which it is written, "You must leave this country within 2 weeks. If you fail to do so, you'll be sent immediately to a concentration camp."
Eichmann wrote to a friend in the SS.
I have organized the Jews nicely, speeding their exit from Austria and thus Aryanizing the economy. I'm due to be transferred back to Berlin, but I'm reluctant to leave. For the work which I have done willingly, and have felt at home in it.
His efficiency in Austria led to his transfer back to Berlin, where he was put in charge of all Jewish affairs in the Reich. One of the prosecution's most effective witnesses was a German Protestant minister, Heinrich Karl Gruber. He testified that he had met with Eichmann several times, appealing for an end to the persecution of the Jew.
What attitude on the part of Eichmann did you encounter?
I hope the accused will not take this the wrong way. But he impressed me as a man who sits there like a block of ice or a block of marble, who is not feeling anything human at all, and thwarts everyone's attempts to make things better. And the name Eichmann soon became a symbol. A sad symbol.
Eichmann was very intently listening. Here was a witness speaking German. And Gruber spoke to him. And I must have hated every minute. He must have hated it all.
Dr. Gruber, do you remember whether the accused in those meetings ever referred to orders from above which he had received or was about to receive?
As far as I can remember, he would always answer in the first person. He would always use the word I, or you could say abuse the word I. He would say, "I can't, I shall, I will, I shall order." I do not recall that he would ever say that I have to speak with my superiors, that I have to approach a higher authority. This I do not remember at all.
Thank you. Dr. Servadius, would you like to cross-examine the witness?
Dr. Gruber, you said that you repeatedly went to Eichmann's office in order to negotiate with him. What matters did you submit to him?
I submitted to him all the problems confronting us, matters of immigration, personal safety, and all the other matters which were very pressing as a result of the special regulations against the Jews.
If I understood you correctly, you said that his replies were either a no or you must wait. Could the reply, "you must wait," mean that he needed time to consult his superiors?
In our dealings, I never had the impression that the accused was waiting for the instructions of his superiors. Certainly, the accused wanted to give me the impression that he was the person in charge. Whether he was the person in charge, I was obviously not able to judge.
World War II began in September of 1939 when Germany launched its attack against Poland, home to Europe's largest Jewish population. Eichmann's office gave German troops orders to kill Jews they considered security threats. Ada Lichtman was 20 years old when the German army overran her hometown near Krakow.
The Germans went from one house to the other and took the Jewish men from their homes. They didn't care how old they were.
And your father, too?
My father, too.
How many men were taken?
32. First they wrote down their names and took their pictures. Then they were marched to the marketplace with their hands behind their heads and were forced to shout, "We are traitors to the people." After that, they loaded them onto a truck and drove them away. I ran after them into the woods, following them into a small forest known as Tajitz. All the Jews who had been taken were already dead. My father was also dead, shot many places. We ran back to town, but first I kissed my father. He was already cold, ice cold. Although it had only been 1 hour since they took him away, his blood had already drained from his body.
Expulsion and murder were inadequate to deal with the 3 million Polish Jews. From Berlin, Eichmann ordered them rounded up and forced into ghettos and labor camps. A major challenge for the prosecution was connecting the witnesses to Eichmann and his actions.
Most of these witnesses couldn't have mentioned Eichmann because they never heard about him. We, the prosecution, had to convince the courts that what they suffered and what they had seen is the outcome of Eichmann's orders. It all comes from that office.
In 1940, Henrik Ross, a press photographer before the war, was taken into custody and shipped to the Jewish ghetto in the town of Łódź. He secretly photographed the brutal conditions there. With photos taken by Ross and others, prosecutors painted a picture of ghetto life, including the one in Łódź, where 160,000 people were packed into an area smaller than 3 square miles. When Eichmann forced in another 20,000, the district commissioner naively complained that Eichmann must have had inaccurate information about the capacity of the ghetto. 120,000 Jews in the Łódź ghetto died of starvation. The Jews who were not forced into ghettos were condemned to Poland's 300 labor camps. When he took the witness stand, Dr. Leon Wells was a physicist with a string of patents to his name. But in 1941, he was a 16-year-old boy in a labor camp a few miles from his hometown.
By end of May, we were 2,000 prisoners in this concentration camp. Typhus started to spread very quickly. And to clean out the typhus, they burned our barracks. We had to be undressed because also they burned our clothing, so the typhus doesn't spread. And we were laying for 3 days and 3 nights in the sun with our heads down. I lost conscience. And in 1 minute, somebody kicked me here on the side. He told us all to line up in a line to march with the shovels, and we knew that we are marching into the direction to be buried. When we got to the tent, we found that there was no grave prepared for us, and we started to dig our own grave. When the grave was finished, they started to read from this registration list, and by 2 walked down the grave, had to lay down with side by side with their faces down, and were shot. The next 2 had to cover a little sand over the first 2 and lay down in the other direction line by line and were shot again, and so it went ahead.
We found that many young people did not want to hear about the Holocaust because they somehow felt ashamed of what happened. I mean, a young Israeli can understand that you can go down, that you can be killed in a fight, even may lose a battle here or there. But that millions of people can be slaughtered without defense, that's something a young Israeli just cannot grasp.
And it was for this reason that Hausner especially asked witness after witness this question: why didn't you rebel? Why didn't you fight? Why didn't you revolt?
We were all standing there. It was said in the camp that the young boy, Haubenstock, was going to be hanged for whistling a Russian tune. And when he was hanged, something incredible happened. The rope snapped. The boy was again lifted onto a high chair under the rope, and he started to beg for his life. Despite this, an order was given to hang him a second time. The boy was again raised to the gallows, and this time he hanged. A second man, Krautwerk, cut the veins of his wrists with a razor blade, and in this condition went up to the gallows. While his blood was running, he was hanged. And the SS men filed through our ranks carrying their machine guns and ordered us to watch the hanging.
Dr. Baisky, 15,000 people were standing there and only a few hundred guards were facing you. Why didn't you revolt? Why didn't you charge and attack these guards?
I believe that this is difficult to explain or to answer. There is not one single reply. It will be difficult for anyone who is not there to understand. May I now be permitted to sit?
At this moment I felt I can't remain on my feet anymore, and I asked to sit down. I had to try to organize my mind what kind of answer I can give on this, I would say, horrible or maybe stupid question. Why he did ask? Probably he wanted here to have a clear answer that it was impossible.
אין יותר מקום היום, גם אצלי, ואני מודה בכך, כעבור 18 שנה.
Today, after 18 years, I can no longer describe this feeling of fear. Today, when I stand before your honors, it does not exist any longer. And I believe that one cannot really imagine it. This was a terrifying feeling, to gaze upon the hanging of a boy as he begs for mercy, especially when there's nothing you can do about it. And where could we escape to? We were in uniforms. At that time, they were not concentration camp uniforms, but they were all dyed yellow with yellow stripes. And even if we say for a moment that 15,000 men succeeded to leave the camp, where could they go? What could we do?
There hovers a question in the air of this courtroom. Why did the people not revolt? Well, I, as a fighting Jew, resent this question.
Even though Abba Kovner had been a resistance fighter, he passionately defended those who could not resist.
Only people with a strong will may do so. And people with strong wills are not to be found amongst the desperate and the broken. But even this war, which has been called a war of despair, created people who believed, people who had faith that there was a cause to die for 1 hour earlier, to sacrifice oneself for something which was greater than life. Because of this despair in which people found themselves, where their image of humanity had been taken away from them, it was not easy for people to accept this call to action. This is not surprising, nor is it unusual. On the contrary, it is a miracle that there existed a minority who believed in this call to action and did what they did during those years. The very existence of a fighting resistance, that was not rational. It was an amazing achievement.
In June of 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Special units called Einsatzgruppen followed immediately behind the advancing German troops. Under orders from Eichmann, these units hunted down the Jews and killed them. It is believed that during the summer, Hitler issued an order that the Jewish question now be resolved once and for all.
I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
A special trial of Einsatzgruppen officers had been convened after the war, and an American judge, Michael Musmano, had presided over it. He was considered an expert on these special units, and Hausner called him as a witness to tie them to Eichmann.
What, if anything, can you say about the purpose of the Einsatzgruppen with regard to Jews?
The main and principal objective of the Einsatzgruppen was to kill Jews and rob them of their property.
What can you say about Eichmann's connection with the Einsatzgruppen?
Eichmann supervised and directed the activities of the Einsatzgruppen in the extermination of Jews. From time to time, Eichmann visited the Einsatzgruppen in the field and attended executions. Eichmann had practically unlimited power to declare who was to be killed among the Jews, chronologically and by segment of population, what countries, geographically, and throughout.
Abraham Avia was 14 when the Einsatzgruppen rounded up all the Jews in his small village in White Russia and marched them to the local cemetery.
I tried to wait and see what had happened to my family and whether the Germans had discovered them or not. To my dismay, I saw that my mother, my little brother, my uncle, and other Jews that I knew were among those who they had found. I walked with my mother. We walked together, mother and children. She said, "Say Shema Yisrael, recite the prayer of Shema Yisrael. We shall die as Jews." When we got there, approximately 100 meters from the cemetery, we were told to get off the road. They made us kneel with our heads down. We were not permitted to raise our heads nor glance to the sides. We could only hear shots at our sides. Since I was smaller then and shorter than the others, I could raise my head without being seen. And I saw before me a long trench. The Germans began to lead the Jews, row by row, group by group, to that trench. They made the people undress, and then would force them up a little hill near the trench. Rounds of machine gun fire were heard, and then people would fall into the trench. There had always been this idea among us that at least one of us must come through this alive, so that he could tell his story. I said goodbye to my mother. I began jumping over the heads of those people kneeling near me. I jumped, fell down, and got up again, not giving a thought to what might happen. I really don't know how I wasn't noticed. Perhaps by some miracle I wasn't discovered. I managed to reach the edge of the road at the rim of the trench. I lay down and was afraid to get up and continue, just in case they might notice me. What happened to your mother and your younger brother? My brother, Yekutiel, together with my mother, was shot there on that same day. Only later did I learn that I was the only one who, for some reason, managed to escape and survive.
The Einsatzgruppen killed nearly 1 million Jews in just 6 months. But Nazi leaders worried that carrying out so many close-up, cold-blooded murders would be too much of a strain on their troops. Eichmann began to feel the need for what he called a more elegant solution. And in a suburb of Berlin called Wannsee, he helped organize a meeting of the Nazi brass to find it. The notorious Wannsee Conference lasted only an hour and a half, but it put into motion the program for the systematic extermination of the Jews at the death camps. At the Wannsee Conference, Eichmann presented estimates for the numbers of Jews that would be deported from each country and gassed in the camps. At Eichmann's trial, the prosecution called witnesses from different countries who could tell the world how the Wannsee decisions were carried out. Dr. Joseph Mickman explained how the deportations from Holland to the death camps were organized.
The Nazis told the Jewish administration that on an upcoming day, which was always a Tuesday, a certain number of Jews were to be deported, 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000, and the Jewish administration was required to provide the names of these people. The administration knew the number of people always by Saturday. And then the closer it came to Tuesday, the more the tension grew. At 3 o'clock on Tuesday morning, there was absolute silence and darkness, and the administration called out names, as if they were pronouncing a death sentence on those about to be deported. This left us with such a terrifying feeling that those of us who were there to this day dread Tuesdays, the day of the death sentences for Holland's Jews.
Captured Nazi documents, many of them signed by Eichmann, were entered as evidence to support the testimony of the witnesses. Documents recorded how Jews throughout Europe were transported to the death camp. Dr. George Valère told the court how the Jewish children of France were sent to the internment camp at Drancy.
The judges were very precise about insisting that everything should be relevant. So here we brought a witness, a Professor Valère from France, who visited the infamous Drancy camp. And there he described how Jewish children were brought there.
There were 4 transports arriving every 3 or 4 days, 1,000 children in each.
So then I asked, who was Jacques Stern? So the judges asked me, is that relevant? And I said, well, I'll connect it with the case. And then this witness described how there was a little boy who particularly struck him. The child didn't cry and didn't laugh and didn't take part in the games. And he was there very silent. And he saw that the child had a clenched fist all the time. He didn't open his hand, one hand. So then he asked the child, finally, when they became better friends, what have you got here? And then the child opened his hand and there was half a biscuit there. And he said, I keep this for my mother when I meet her. I mean, he knew that they were no longer there. And then the child began to cry for the first time. And then immediately after that, I handed in a telegram sent by Eichmann to his representative in the Drancy camp. And there he writes, I'm delighted to inform you that children's transports can now move from Drancy to Auschwitz.
Dr. Wellers, did the children leave the camp easily? Most of the time, this was a terrible procedure. We had to wake the children at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was still dark in Paris. Children would cry, quarrel, resist. It was impossible to make them come down voluntarily. And the police would go upstairs and take the weeping and resisting children downstairs forcibly.
And then I asked the witness, what happened afterwards? So he said, I went to Auschwitz later, and not one of them was alive anymore.
The prosecutors now documented Eichmann's role in the death camps. They showed that he had been associated with Auschwitz from the start, and that, along with the camp commandant, he had even selected the site for the gas chambers. He had approved the use of Zyklon B gas and had helped supply it to the camps. Eichmann visited the camps to witness the systematic killing.
What is your full name?
Yechiel Denur wrote several books based on his experiences at Auschwitz. He used the pseudonym Katzetnik, German slang for a camp inmate.
We had a very big problem with Katzetnik, and he told my husband, Gideon, don't rely on me. And he was very important, because he was the only man, not the only, perhaps there was some more, who met Eichmann in Auschwitz. And he really could tell the story of Eichmann. But he didn't want to come forward. He said, I won't be able to stand up to it.
What is the reason that you chose the pen name Katzetnik, Mr. Denur?
This is not a pen name. I do not regard myself as one who writes literature. This is a chronicle of the planet of Auschwitz. And the inhabitants of this planet had no names. They had no parents, nor did they have children. Their names were their numbers. Katzetnik, number so-and-so. For almost 2 years, they kept taking leave of me, and they always left me behind. I see them. They're staring at me. I see them. I saw them standing in the line.
Perhaps, Mr. Denur, I can ask you a few questions, if you will agree.
Mr. Denur, please listen to Mr. Hausner. Wait a minute. Now listen to me.
Denur had been right. It was too much for him. He suffered a paralytic stroke.
I'm asking for silence. Everyone sit in his place. Sit in your places.
The witness's wife, who is in the audience, is now approaching him. I do not believe we can go on. We shall take a recess now, and you, Mr. Attorney General, will kindly inform us as soon as you find out whether the witness is capable of going on.
Like Denur, many witnesses were reluctant to testify.
But you have to understand, after years, that I was here, a member of a kibbutz, and started already a regular life, a life which is more or less a normal life. And suddenly, yes, I have to encounter, to confront a man which was the which for me he was, you know, this terrible thing, this unhuman thing.
Did you see people being marched into the gas chambers?
I saw this march of naked people. Amongst them, I saw a boy. I do not know how old he was, maybe about 10 years old. I saw that the boy was holding in his hands, in his arms, an even younger child. And I saw two SS men. One was pointing out the scene to the other and laughing. I want to say that at such moments, I tried to look in their eyes. Stealthily, because a direct stare was too dangerous. I wanted to see if they showed any trace of scruples, of mental anguish, whether there was any spark of humanity in their eyes. But I always met the same gaze. When we were sad and grieving, they were happy. Whenever they could torture us, they laughed.
Mr. Gutman.
They were drunk with blood.
The Nazis told people in the ghettos that their families and friends were being sent to the camps to work. Death camp inmates were forced to write postcards saying how well they were being treated. But eventually the truth filtered back to the ghettos that people were in fact being gassed. In the Warsaw Ghetto, this news had a profound effect.
And in the meantime, you learned of the extermination camps, about Treblinka, about Chelmno.
Yitzhak Zuckerman was the ghetto fighter Gideon Hausner had visited before the trial.
I heard about Treblinka for the first time during the week of Passover 1942.
And you informed the others?
Yes, we published leaflets. We said Aussiedlung, resettlement, means Treblinka, and Treblinka means death. And we called upon the Jews to hide.
Hausner asked Zuckerman to describe how the Jews drove the Germans from the Warsaw Ghetto in January 1943.
I insisted that because we had survived, there was no sense in selling our lives so cheaply. If it happens, I said, that we gain a few weeks or even a few days, then we must take an oath that we will overcome any difficulty to obtain arms and fight. We were about 40 people, and only a few of us were armed. We could circulate easily among the houses, on the rooftops. The Germans imagined that there were many large groups, but we were only small units. We obtained quite a number of arms. We killed and disarmed Germans. We obtained grenades and rifles, and this was important for us. And the last thing we obtained faith, that we can fight, that we know how to fight.
The Warsaw Jews fought the German army for 6 months. To crush them, the Nazis had to destroy the ghetto. Eichmann visited Warsaw after it was all over and was surprised at what he saw.
I never imagined that ghettoized Jews would be able to fight in such a manner. I seldom saw a place so destroyed as Warsaw.
Germany invaded its former ally, Hungary, in March of 1944. Hungarian Jews now faced the same danger as other European Jews. Eichmann's superior and head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, sent him to Budapest immediately.
Usually Eichmann sat in Berlin and pulled the strings, but when the Hungarian Jews were deported, Himmler said he would send the master himself, Eichmann, there to prevent any uprising like in the Warsaw Ghetto.
As he had done throughout Europe, Eichmann outlawed all existing Jewish organizations and set up a central Jewish council to carry out his orders. Pinchas Freudiger was a member.
Mr. Freudiger, did you meet Adolf Eichmann in Budapest? You see the accused here in court? Can you identify him?
In my mind's eye, Obersturmbannführer Eichmann appears in uniform, in high boots, standing with his legs apart and his hands on the pistol in his belt, and shouting at me from the heights of the master race. But despite that, I believe he is the man. The SS officers and Eichmann maintained and promised that they were sending Jews to work in Germany. And for each question that we asked, they had an excuse. We asked how they could send elderly people and children together with people who could work. And they said, this is the German way, to send people together with their families. For then they work better, because they don't miss their families.
So here in the trial, we managed to depict stage after stage these devilish plans and the devilish ingenuity with which the Germans misled the victims.
Despite the Nazis' reassurances, the Jewish Council searched for a way to save its community. Deals were made with Nazis, money for the passage of Jews to neutral countries, but these deals were rarely carried out. As a result, Jewish leaders were only able to save their own families. To many survivors, this looked like a sellout by their leaders.
Somebody is screaming in Hungarian from the audience, apparently at the witness, but it is not clear what he's saying. It's all in Hungarian. He's being hustled out by policemen. The president of court asks for quiet in the courtroom. There's quite a commotion in the audience. People in the balcony are trying to see what is happening. The president says if there is no quiet in the courtroom, he might stop and interrupt the session. The court, I wish to have quiet in the courtroom. This is the last time I ask for this. You will have a chance later to discuss this incident among yourselves.
I wanted to ask you, when did you learn from a Jewish source what they were doing to the Jews in Auschwitz?
The end of May or the beginning of June, I received a batch of letters among which was a report on Auschwitz. I began reading the report. I read it, and I went on reading. I asked myself if one could truly believe this. I still well remember it. I can see before me the last page. There it said, so far 1,450,000 Jews had been put to death. He gave details, from France, from here, from there, detailed numbers, and another 300,000 from various places. And then, the last sentence. Now they are getting ready to receive the Jews of Hungary.
We got off the train, and it was in such a hurry and at such a fast pace that we did not realize what was happening. They said to us that the men should stand on the right side with the children over the age of 14. At that moment, I could not lie, and I told him 12 years old. Then he said to my son, "Wo ist die Mutti? Where is your mother?" And I answered, "She went to the left." And then he said to my son, "Run after your mother." After that, I went on walking to the right, and I saw how the boy was running. I wondered to myself, how will he be able to find his mother? After all, there were so many people there. I caught sight of my wife. How did I recognize her? My little girl was wearing a red coat. The red spot was a sign that my wife was there. The red spot was getting smaller and smaller. I walked to the right, and I never saw them again.
Now, just by chance, I had bought my little daughter, who was still 2.5 years old. 2 weeks before that, I had bought her a little red coat. And when the witness said that, it cut me off completely. I couldn't utter a sound. I was standing there for maybe it took a minute or two, but perhaps more. The television was on me. The judges asked for the next question. The witness had recovered and waited. And I couldn't say a word until I managed to get myself under control again. And after that, I can walk in the street, I can sit in a football stadium, I can sit in a restaurant. I suddenly feel my heart beating, and I turn around and I see a little child in a red coat.
By the fall of 1944, heavy Allied bombing had taken a toll on the European railroad system, which was needed for both the war effort and deportation of Jews. The Germans were also suffering losses on the Eastern Front. Hoping to ingratiate himself with the Russians, who were fast approaching Budapest, Himmler tried to halt the final solution. He ordered Eichmann to stop all deportations from Hungary. Eichmann ignored Himmler's orders and rounded up another 50,000 Jews. Unable to deport them by train, he decided to march them to death camps in Poland. One of the 50,000 was Aviva Fleischmann.
They lined us up in rows. Then we began marching.
Did you know where you were going?
No, they said we were going to work. We walked from early in the morning until late in the night. There were many people who fell by the side of the road, even on the first day, and never got
What
up.
happened to them?
Either the Germans shot them or beat them to death or left them behind to die alone.
How many people were in this group where you were marching?
Some 1,500 to 2,000 people. We walked in fours.
Now, for how many days did you walk?
We walked for 8 days.
Finally, they became then more fanatical than even the people who are more guilty than he, like Hitler and Himmler. Because for them there were other things like the military or the political situation, which was as important, perhaps even more important than killing every last Jew. For him it was only that, and he became completely identified with this. And he told his friends, "I know the war is lost, but I'm still going to win my war." And then he went to Auschwitz to get the death rate increased from 10,000 to 12,000 a day.
All day you were busy moving corpses.
Yes, all day I worked moving bodies from the gas chambers to the graves.
Eliyahu Rosenberg had been put on a work detail at the Treblinka death camp, which Eichmann visited on several occasions.
The people arrived from the famous Himmelstrasse, the street to heaven, which led from camp number 1 to camp number 2. SS men were posted all along that road, the entire staff of camp 2, with dogs, whips, and bayonets in their hands. People walked calmly at first. That was in the beginning, in the summer of 1942. They did not know where they were being led. And when they entered the gas chambers, 2 Ukrainians stood near the entrance. One was Ivan and the other Nikolai, and they turned on the gas.
Where did the gas come from?
The gas came from a diesel engine, and the fumes came out of a pipe which led into the gas chambers. And when the people entered into the gas chambers, the last ones were stabbed in their bodies with bayonets, because they already saw what was going on inside and did not want to enter. They saw that people were jammed inside, 400 people into one small chamber. And when the last people were stabbed, they just automatically pushed inside. And in this way, the gas chamber reached full capacity. It was so jam-packed that it was difficult to close the door. And when they locked the door, we were on the outside. We heard only screams and Shema Yisrael prayers. Mother, father. After 35 minutes, they were all dead. There is a Yiddish idiom which was created in a different context, not connected with Treblinka. Not even a bird left this place alive. Not even ravens left Treblinka alive. There were ravens there, and when a raven got hold of a piece of bone of a person or a child, the Ukrainian guards in their towers opened murderous fire on that raven, so that he wouldn't leave the place with a piece of human flesh or skin.
At Auschwitz, there were 5 ovens which could cremate 10 to 12,000 bodies a day. The Nazis operated another 5 death camps where the Jews of Europe were killed. Images from these death camps became the last exhibits placed in the evidence. They had been filmed as the Allies liberated the camps, and now they were projected in the Israeli courtroom for all to see, even Eichmann from his dim corner. In the course of 2 months, the Israeli prosecutors had presented 110 witnesses, more than 1,600 documents, which they said proved Eichmann's crimes against the Jewish people. For 2 months, he sat watching and listening. Now, as the prosecution rested its case, Eichmann had to prepare for his one chance of survival, taking the stand to defend himself.
Will you put your right hand on the New Testament?
I do not swear by the Bible. I swear by Almighty God.
We shall permit you to swear in a way that you will find binding. Therefore, repeat after me. I swear by God.
I swear by God.
That my testimony will be the
truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Mr. President, honorable judges, in this case, we confront 2 separate worlds, one of victims and one of the dictator. The defense will prove that the accused was not included in the leadership that was giving orders, but with those receiving orders on the lowest rung.
It was impossible for Eichmann to deny his role in killing Europe's Jews. Eichmann and Servatius adopted the defense strategy that had been used at Nuremberg. Since he could not disavow the crimes, he disavowed the responsibility for them. He was just following orders.
You joined a party whose ideology was the persecution of Jews. Can you tell the court why you joined this party and what you have to say in regard to the persecution of the Jews?
When I joined the Nazi Party in early 1932, it was just before an election. The political parties were at the height of their campaign. The Nazis had to let the progress